There is a silence within you that you have tried to escape for years. It arrives in the empty spaces of the night when the noise of the world finally quiets and you are left with yourself. You may call it loneliness, you may call it a void, or perhaps it is simply a weight you cannot explain. For most of your life, you have been told that emptiness is a curse, that to feel hollow inside means something has gone terribly wrong. But what if the opposite were true? What if this emptiness you carry, the one you've been trying so hard to fill, is not a defect, but a secret invitation? What if it was placed within you not to torment you, but to guide you towards something greater than the world has ever offered? This is what Ibn Arabi, the great mystic, tried to whisper through his words, that absence is not the opposite of presence, but the doorway to it. The human heart has an unusual hunger. No matter how much we feed it with love, success, or experiences, it remains unsatisfied. We buy more, we achieve more, we connect more, and yet the hollowness lingers like a shadow. It is in this dissatisfaction that Ibn Arabi saw the hidden design of the soul. The void within you is not a mistake, but a compass. Think of emptiness as the hollow reed of a flute. Without the emptiness inside, no sound, no music could ever pass through. The very thing you despise about yourself, that feeling of incompleteness, is what makes you capable of carrying divine breath. The hollow becomes the vessel, and the vessel becomes the song. Most of us run from this realization. We spend years distracting ourselves, filling every moment with stimulation so we don't have to sit with the silence. But silence is patient. It waits at the edges of every distraction, whispering that no matter how far you run, the truth of your emptiness will always find you. And yet, emptiness is not chasing you to harm you. It is chasing you to bring you back home. In Ibn Arabi's vision, what feels like lack is actually abundance in disguise, waiting to reveal itself to the one who is brave enough to sit still. The void is not punishment, but preparation. When you feel hollow, you are closer to truth than when you feel full. Fullness can be an illusion, a temporary satisfaction that fades as soon as the source is gone. But emptiness strips everything away, leaving only the essential, the real, the unshakable. It is in that stripping away that the soul begins to awaken. You may notice how emptiness feels like falling. There is no ground, no certainty, no solid surface to stand on. And yet this falling is not toward destruction, but toward depth. It is the gravity of the soul pulling you closer to what you truly are. The mystics knew this. They wrote about longing not as weakness, but as the very proof of the soul's connection to something beyond this world. Longing hurts, yes, but only because it stretches us beyond the smallness of our daily lives. It is the ache of the heart remembering what it was made for. Have you ever wondered why no achievement is ever enough? Why even the sweetest love leaves a residue of yearning? It is because the soul was not built to be satisfied with the temporary. Its hunger is infinite, and only the infinite can answer it. So the void remains, not because you are broken, but because you are vast. Not because you are unworthy, but because your worth is measured in how deeply you can contain what the world cannot give. Your emptiness is not failure, it is capacity. Ibn Arabi once said that the heart is an infinite mirror, reflecting both the world and what lies beyond it. But a mirror must be empty of its own image if it is to reflect clearly. In the same way, your inner emptiness is not a curse, but a polishing, a clearing of space so that something higher can appear. Without it, the light could not enter. This is why the void feels so uncomfortable. It is pulling you into a space where nothing familiar remains. It removes the ground beneath your feet so that you cannot stand on anything less than truth. It is stripping away your false identities, not to leave you barren, but to make you free. Imagine a seed buried in the dark soil. From the outside, it looks like death, silence, emptiness, nothingness. But inside, life is beginning its most sacred work. The shell is cracking, the roots are forming, the unseen growth is preparing to break the surface. Your emptiness is the same. It may look like nothing is happening, like everything has stopped, but beneath the silence, transformation is taking place. Something within you is preparing to emerge, something that could never come alive if the soil of your soul were not first emptied. And so perhaps the question is not how to escape the void, but how to listen to it. What is your emptiness trying to tell you? What invitations lie hidden in its silence? What parts of yourself are being broken open so that new life can grow? Most people spend their entire lives trying to cover the emptiness inside. They bury it under relationships, careers, endless distractions, or even spiritual practices meant only to silence the ache rather than understand it. But every attempt to cover the void is like painting over a window. The paint may hide the transparency for a while, but it also blocks the light from entering. To feel empty is not a flaw in your humanity. It is the very design of it. Emptiness creates space, and space creates possibility. Without space, nothing new could ever be born. Think about your breath. Inhale, exhale. In every moment, emptiness makes life possible. The lungs must empty themselves before they can fill again. If you only inhaled, you would suffocate. If you only exhaled, you would die. It is the rhythm of emptiness and fullness that sustains life itself. The same is true of the soul. If your heart was never emptied, it would never have room for renewal. Your longing, your loneliness, your unfulfilled desires, all of them are signs that your soul is clearing space for something larger than your current life can contain. This is not punishment, it is preparation. Ibn Arabi hinted that God hides himself in the spaces where we think nothing exists. The unseen, the silence, the void, these are not absences, but veils. When you sit in your emptiness long enough, the veil begins to thin, and what looked like nothingness reveals itself as the deepest presence. The emptiness becomes a doorway into the unseen. But you must resist the urge to fill it too quickly. The modern world despises silence. We are trained to keep moving, to keep consuming, to keep ourselves busy so we never have to confront the quiet spaces. Yet the quiet spaces are where truth waits. Have you ever noticed how the most profound realizations arrive not when you are rushing, but when you are still? It is often in solitude, in the pause between one moment and the next, that the heart whispers what it truly knows. That whisper is easily drowned by noise, but emptiness amplifies it. This is why loneliness feels so heavy. It is not just the absence of people, but the presence of yourself, unfiltered, raw, undeniable. When no one is around to distract you, the silence introduces you to your own reflection, and in that reflection, you begin to glimpse the infinite. Loneliness is often mistaken for emptiness, but the two are not the same. Loneliness is the ache for connection, but emptiness is the space in which connection becomes possible. Loneliness says, "I am without." Emptiness says,
I am open. And in that openness, the sacred can enter. Ibn Arabi believed that the soul was vast enough to hold every reality, but to hold everything, it first has to become nothing. That is why emptiness feels endless, because it is the beginning of infinity. It is not a wall, it is an opening. Consider the sky. It looks like an endless void, an empty expanse stretching beyond what the eye can see. Yet it is precisely this emptiness that allows the stars to shine. Without the darkness, without the vast open space, the light would have nowhere to appear. Your emptiness is the same. It may feel like darkness, but it is a canvas for light. It may feel like nothingness, but it is the womb of everything that could be. If you can hold it, if you can sit within it, you will find it slowly fills with meaning. The problem is that most of us don't sit long enough. We panic at the first sign of silence. We grab our phones, turn on the TV, call a friend, anything to escape the unease of emptiness. But every time we run, we miss the gift waiting inside the void. Imagine if instead of running, you leaned into it. What would you hear if you listened to your emptiness rather than silenced it? What would you discover if you let it unfold without trying to fix it? The answer is not in escaping the void, but in surrendering to it. This surrender is not easy. It feels like giving up control, like falling into something you cannot measure or predict. But control was always an illusion. Emptiness simply reveals the truth that life was never in your control to begin with. And strangely, this realization can be the beginning of peace. Because once you stop fighting the emptiness, it softens. It no longer feels like an enemy, but like a teacher that speaks in silence, but whose lessons are unforgettable. One of those lessons is humility. When the soul is emptied, it cannot rely on its usual defenses, pride, certainty, ego. You stand vulnerable, exposed, small. And in that smallness, you discover a greatness that was hidden all along. Another lesson is compassion. Those who have known the depth of emptiness can recognize it in others. They see the silent battles, the invisible wounds, the quiet ache in the people around them. And rather than judge, they soften because they know what it feels like to carry a void. But perhaps the most important lesson is trust. To sit in emptiness is to trust that it has meaning even if you cannot see it yet. It is to believe that the void is not the end of your story, but the ground of a new beginning. It is faith made visible in silence. And this is where emptiness transforms from curse to blessing. When you stop resisting it, emptiness stops being a hole and becomes a horizon. It points you towards what is beyond, what is greater, what is eternal. It teaches you that the space within you was never empty at all, but waiting to be filled with the infinite.
There is a hidden paradox at the heart of emptiness. The more you resist it, the larger it seems to grow. But the moment you soften into it, the moment you breathe and allow it to exist, it begins to shrink into something bearable, even beautiful. Emptiness is not a monster that devours you. It is a mirror, showing you what remains when everything else is stripped away. So much of our suffering comes from confusing emptiness with failure. We believe that if our lives feel hollow, then we must have done something wrong, that we are missing some essential ingredient that everyone else has found. But emptiness is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of being alive. Every human being, no matter how successful, no matter how loved, will one day meet the silence within themselves. Think of the great mystics, the poets, the seekers across history. Almost all of them speak of a period of emptiness, a dark night, a desert of the soul. These were not detours from their path. They were the path. Emptiness stripped them bare until only truth remained. Ibn Arabi often spoke of the space of possibility, a vastness beyond forms and identities, where the soul encounters the real. This space is not found in noise or in fullness, but in emptiness. When the heart is emptied of distractions, of attachments, of the illusions it clings to, it becomes a vessel wide enough to hold eternity. And though the experience may feel desolate, it is actually the threshold of union. What if your emptiness was not the enemy, but the invitation? What if this hollow space within you was not a punishment, but a preparation for something far beyond your current imagination? So much of spiritual growth is about learning to see differently, to recognize that what looks like absence is often presence in disguise, and emptiness is the greatest disguise of all. It is no accident that some of the most transformative insights arrive when everything else has been taken away. When you lose the job you thought defined you, when the relationship you built your life around falls apart, when the future you dreamed of collapses in your hands. It is in those moments, when all that is familiar has been stripped, that emptiness walks into the room. But emptiness does not come to destroy you. It comes to remind you that you are more than what you lost. It comes to show you the space that existed before the attachments, before the illusions, before the identities. It is not a thief, but a guide. The challenge is that we rarely recognize it as such. We curse our emptiness, label it depression, failure, weakness. And yet, if we could sit with it just a little longer, we might hear its deeper message. That message is simple. Make space. Something greater is coming. Ibn Arabi used the metaphor of the heart as a polished mirror, but a mirror cannot reflect light when it is cluttered, when its surface is covered in dust. Emptiness is the hand that wipes the mirror clean. It feels like loss, but it is making room for clarity. In a world obsessed with accumulation, emptiness feels radical. We are told to constantly add more possessions, more achievements, more connections. But Ibn Arabi's wisdom suggests the opposite: to subtract, to let go, to empty, because only an empty vessel can be filled. There is a quiet strength in embracing emptiness. It requires courage to sit in a room alone and not reach for distraction. It requires trust to look into the silence of your own heart and not turn away. And it requires patience to wait for the meaning that emptiness carries hidden within it. But if you do, something begins to shift. The void that once felt unbearable starts to feel spacious. The silence that once felt heavy starts to feel sacred. And slowly, the fear dissolves into peace. This peace is not loud. It does not announce itself with fireworks or grand revelations. It arrives like dawn, almost imperceptible at first, a soft glow where there was once only darkness. And before you know it, the emptiness you feared has become the very place where light begins to rise. There is a teaching, unspoken but deeply felt, that emptiness carries with it a hidden intimacy. Because in your emptiness, you meet yourself without masks, you meet life without filters, and you meet the divine not as an abstract idea, but as a presence that fills the silence with meaning. This is why Ibn Arabi could see emptiness not as a curse, but a secret blessing. He recognized that the hollow spaces of the heart are not barren fields, but sacred ground, the ground upon which new life grows,
the soil in which unseen seeds are planted. What feels like nothingness is often the beginning of everything. So the question becomes, can you trust the emptiness within you? Not just tolerate it, not just survive it, but welcome it as part of your path. Can you see it as the space where transformation begins? Because if you can, emptiness ceases to be an enemy and becomes your most faithful companion.
There comes a moment, often in the quietest hours of the night, when you realize the emptiness you feared is not trying to consume you, it is trying to speak to you. You sit with it long enough, and it becomes less like an enemy pressing against your chest and more like a companion who has been waiting patiently for you to listen. The silence it brings is not the silence of death, but the silence of a doorway opening into another kind of life. You begin to see that emptiness is not absence, it is invitation. When Ibn Arabi spoke of the void, he did not treat it as a mistake in the fabric of existence. He described it as a mirror, polished by the hand of the divine, so that in its vastness we might catch a reflection of what we truly are. It is not a punishment to feel hollow, it is an opportunity. The hollow vessel is the one that can be filled. The cup that is already full has no room for new water, but the cup that is empty waits with readiness, with thirst, with an openness that is sacred. Think of the sky after the storm passes. For hours or days the clouds gather heavy, releasing their burden as rain. But then, once the storm has moved on, what is left? An emptiness that reveals a vastness beyond comprehension. The blue of the sky seems deeper after the storm, the horizon endless. Emptiness does the same thing in the human heart. It clears away the clouds of distraction, leaving us face to face with the infinite. And yet, how often do we rush to cover this emptiness? We drown it in noise, in conversations that do not touch us, in endless scrolling, in rituals of busyness, anything to avoid being left alone with the hollow space within. But Ibn Arabi would ask us, what are we so afraid to see? Why do we treat this emptiness as if it were a thief, when it is in fact the most faithful of teachers? What might happen if we let the silence speak? Slowly, you begin to understand. Emptiness is not here to harm you. It is here to strip away everything that is false. The masks you wear, the identities you cling to, the illusions you build, all of them begin to dissolve in the quiet of the void. It hurts, yes, because we are attached to these illusions, but as they fade, what remains is something truer, something more eternal. The emptiness makes space for what was always meant to live within you. In this space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel a closeness to life that was never possible when you were full of noise. You notice the sound of your breath, and it feels like a gift. You notice the way sunlight falls across a wooden table, and you feel a tenderness that has no name. The world does not rush to fill your emptiness with answers. Instead, it expands, gently, allowing you to realize that emptiness itself was the answer. It was the place where wonder could enter. Ibn Arabi called this kind of realization a form of unveiling, not a grand revelation with trumpets and thunder, but the quiet removal of a veil that has covered your eyes for too long. When the veil of fear is lifted, emptiness no longer looks like death. It looks like birth. It looks like a beginning. What you thought was the end of your story becomes the opening line of another chapter. And in that chapter, emptiness does not isolate you, it connects you. For the first time, you see yourself in others' silence, in their longing, in their loneliness. You realize that every human being carries this same hollow space inside, whether they admit it or not. This recognition becomes the birthplace of compassion. To sit with your own emptiness is to understand the emptiness of another and to feel less alone. In fact, it is in the hollow space where the most authentic connections are formed. Emptiness also teaches you the art of listening. When you are not crowded by your own noise, you begin to hear the world differently. The sound of the wind is no longer background. It becomes a conversation. The pause between two people speaking feels as important as the words themselves.
Even your own heartbeat feels like a reminder that something deeper is moving within you. This kind of listening transforms the way you live. It turns the ordinary into something sacred. Of course, the journey is not simple. Emptiness will still terrify you at times. It will still feel like a chasm, stretching endlessly, daring you to fall. But over time, you realize you are not falling, you are resting. You are resting into something greater than yourself. The void is not a pit, it is a womb. And every birth, every transformation requires a womb of silence, a womb of darkness, a womb of waiting. Emptiness becomes that sacred space where the old you dissolves and the truer you begins to form. And so the paradox reveals itself. The thing you feared most is also the thing that carries the greatest gift. Emptiness is not the end of meaning, it is the beginning of deeper meaning. It is not the absence of love, it is the soil in which love takes root. It is not proof that you are broken, it is proof that you are human and therefore capable of transformation. Without emptiness, there could be no fullness. Without silence, no music. Without the dark, no dawn. As you surrender to this truth, the anxiety begins to soften. You no longer fight to escape the void, because you realize the void is not separate from you. It is part of the architecture of your soul. It is the echo that allows you to hear the music of existence. And when you stop resisting, the emptiness begins to glow, not with fireworks, but with the quiet light of peace. A peace that feels as though it was always there, waiting, beneath all the noise. This peace is not about escaping the world, it is about returning to it differently. You carry your emptiness like a lantern now, not as a burden. It illuminates your steps, it humbles your ego, it opens your heart. And in this new light, life itself begins to look different. The questions don't all vanish, but the fear behind them does. You know now that emptiness is not a curse. It is the secret door through which the soul meets its own vastness.
There is a moment, subtle and nearly imperceptible, when the emptiness that once felt unbearable begins to feel like home. You sit with it long enough, breathe into it long enough, and you realize it is not cold stone pressing against your chest. It is space, vast and alive, holding you gently. What once seemed like exile now feels like sanctuary. The emptiness has not changed. You have. And this is perhaps the most sacred of revelations. The void was never against you. It was always for you. It was never there to take something away, but to reveal what could not be revealed in any other way. Without the silence, you would have never heard the deeper song. Without the darkness, you would have never noticed the stars. Ibn Arabi spoke often of the paradoxes that shape our existence, the way presence can be hidden in absence, the way fullness can be discovered only through emptiness. He taught that emptiness is not a mistake in creation, but a deliberate design, a doorway through which the soul passes to discover its own infinity. What feels like loss is in truth a form of unveiling. What feels like emptiness is in truth the beginning of communion. Imagine a seed planted deep within the earth. In the soil, there is no light, no sound, no company, only darkness and waiting. If the seed could speak, it might say, "I have been abandoned." But you and I know the truth. The darkness is not its death, it is its womb. The soil is not its prison, it is its shelter. Without the emptiness of the earth, the seed could never split open, could never grow, could never become what it was meant to be. So too with us. The void you carry is the soil of your becoming. It is the place where the shell of who you thought you were begins to crack. It is the space in which the roots of a deeper self begin to spread. It feels like destruction, but it is creation in disguise. It feels like loneliness,
But it is the universe whispering, "Stay here. Something new is being born." And in that birth, you begin to see that emptiness is not separate from love. It is its closest ally. Because what is love if not the willingness to open, to make space for another, to welcome the unknown? Love is, at its heart, a kind of emptiness. It is the clearing of a place within yourself so that something beyond you can live there. To embrace emptiness is to train yourself for love. To welcome emptiness is to welcome the divine. This is why the mystics did not run from the void. They sat with it. They prayed in it. They dissolved into it. Because they knew that emptiness was not a desert, but an ocean. And the longer you sit by its shore, the more you realize you are not separate from it. You are part of it. You are not a stranger in emptiness. You are its child, its breath, its reflection. The world around you begins to shift in small but powerful ways. A walk becomes more than a way to move your body. It becomes a way to listen to silence. A conversation becomes more than an exchange of words. It becomes an opportunity to notice the pauses, the spaces where meaning hides. Even your solitude begins to glow. You find that being alone no longer feels like being abandoned. It feels like being returned to yourself. And perhaps the greatest gift of all is this: you stop fearing the emptiness in others. When you look into the eyes of someone who feels hollow, you no longer rush to fix them or fill them. You know the hollowness for what it is: a sacred passage, a place where transformation is possible. You sit with them in their silence the way you have learned to sit with your own. You offer not answers, but presence. And in that presence, healing begins. Ibn Arabi once wrote that God is the hidden treasure who longs to be known. Emptiness, then, is the treasure chest. The space within you that feels so empty is not a void at all. It is an opening carved by longing through which the treasure reveals itself. Every moment you resist emptiness, you close the chest. Every moment you welcome it, you turn the key. So the question is no longer, how do I escape my emptiness? The question becomes, what is my emptiness trying to show me? What beauty might be waiting just beyond the silence? What truth might be blooming just beneath the soil of this hollow space? What love might be waiting for me in the very place I once feared most? And slowly, as you live with this new perspective, you discover that emptiness is not something you carry. It is something that carries you. It cradles you when everything else falls away. It reminds you of what cannot be destroyed. It teaches you to trust the unseen, to rest in the unknown, to believe in the invisible pulse of life that beats beneath all things. The emptiness that once felt like an enemy becomes a companion, a guide, a friend. You no longer need to fill it, distract it, or silence it. You need only to listen, because hidden in its quiet is the oldest truth, the one the mystics whispered across centuries. Emptiness is not death. Emptiness is life in its most sacred form. And so, in your darkest moments, when the silence feels unbearable, when the hollow space threatens to swallow you, remember this: you are not being swallowed, you are being held. You are not being erased, you are being revealed. The emptiness you feel is not a void to escape. It is the place where your soul meets itself. Let it be your teacher. Let it be your mirror. Let it be the ground on which you are reborn. For in emptiness, the hidden treasure waits. And once you see it, once you truly see it, you will never fear the void again.